Jake had never imagined himself in the grand halls of an alien palace, let alone as the guest of honor. But here he was, standing before Princess Selene of the Felorians, an alien species known for their beauty, strength, and ancient history. He was just a human envoy, sent to help bridge the gap between his people and the many alien species in the galaxy. But today, that wasn't why he was here. Today, he was an unwilling participant in a strange game. Jake had always admired the Felorian culture, but he had never expected to be at the center of their ancient traditions. Selene, with her silver hair and eyes that glowed like stars, had a playful smile as she spoke. "Try it on," she said, pointing toward a grand chest at the side of the room. "It's just a bit of fun. We don't take it seriously." Jake, who had grown used to her teasing nature, raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Selene's eyes sparkled with mischief. "The armor of my ancestors. It's only worn by the greatest warriors of our people. But today, I'll let you try it as a joke. You're human, after all." Jake laughed, shaking his head. He was no warrior. The idea of wearing such an ancient artifact felt absurd. But curiosity got the best of him, and he agreed to put it on. When he stood before the armor, it looked like something out of a legend. The armor was made of shining, almost otherworldly material that glowed faintly. The breastplate was sculpted to fit the wearer's body, with intricate patterns etched into the surface. The helmet, resting on a pedestal, looked almost like a crown, with long, sharp edges extending outwards like the rays of a star. With Selene's encouragement, Jake slipped into the armor. It was heavy, much heavier than he expected, but the weight felt strange, almost comforting, like it was meant to be worn. As the armor settled on his body, he couldn't help but feel a deep hum, a vibration in his chest that seemed to resonate with something inside him. Selene grinned. "There, you look like a true warrior." Jake chuckled. "I feel like I can barely move in this thing." "Of course you can't," she teased. "You're not a Felorian. But just for fun, give it a try. Let's see if you can at least stand straight in it." Jake, still unsure, took a few hesitant steps. To his surprise, the armor seemed to guide him. It wasn't just heavy, it felt natural. His feet moved in ways he had never expected, almost as though the armor was adjusting to his body. It wasn't painful, but there was something powerful, almost mystical about the way it fit him. Selene, still smiling, motioned toward a training dummy in the corner. "Now, let's see if you can fight. Just for fun, of course." Jake raised his hands, unsure of how to even begin. He had never fought with anything, let alone with a piece of ancient, sacred armor. But with a nervous laugh, he swung his arm at the dummy, not expecting much. To his astonishment, the armor responded. His arm moved with incredible precision, and the dummy was knocked to the side with a single blow. Jake blinked in surprise. He had barely put any force into it, yet it had felt like the armor had guided his movements. Selene stared at him, wide-eyed. "How did you do that?" Jake looked down at himself, confused. "I don't know. I just swung. It felt natural. Like the armor wanted me to do it." Selene walked over and inspected him closely. Her usual playful expression had shifted to one of curiosity. "This armor has never fit anyone like this before. It's meant for my people, not for humans." Jake, still not understanding what was happening, laughed it off. "Maybe I'm just lucky. Or maybe I'm stronger than I thought." But Selene wasn't laughing anymore. She had seen something in his movements that she hadn't expected. The armor had responded to Jake as if it had chosen him, and that was not something to be taken lightly. "Jake," she said quietly, "this isn't normal. The armor doesn't just respond like this. It only works for those with the blood of my ancestors running through them." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had only worn the armor for a few minutes, and yet it felt like something had awakened inside him. The power he felt in that moment wasn't his own. It was as if the armor itself had granted him strength he couldn't explain. He looked up at Selene, unsure of what to say. "What does this mean?" Selene hesitated, her usual confidence faltering for a moment. "It means the armor has chosen you, and if it has chosen you, there's more to this than a simple joke. There's a reason it's reacting like this, and I don't think we've even begun to understand it." Jake looked down at the glowing armor on his body. A feeling deep inside him stirred, something ancient and powerful. And for the first time since stepping into this alien world, Jake wondered if he had just walked into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had only worn the armor for a short time, yet it had already changed him. The strange hum he felt in his chest, the power that seemed to flow through his limbs, everything felt different. The armor wasn't just a piece of metal. It felt alive, as if it were connected to him in ways he couldn't explain. As he sat down to remove the armor, Jake realized he couldn't. His body wouldn't let him. It was as though the armor had fused with him. He tugged at the straps, but they didn't budge. The helmet, which had once seemed so heavy, now felt lighter, as though it had adjusted to his very thoughts. The more he tried to remove it, the tighter it felt around his body. "Celine," he called out, his voice tinged with worry. "Something's wrong. I can't take it off." Celine, who had been quietly observing him, raised an eyebrow. Her earlier playful mood had shifted into concern. She stepped closer, inspecting the armor with more scrutiny than before. "This has never happened. The armor has never chosen a human before." Jake's eyes widened. "Chosen me? I thought you were joking when you said that." Celine shook her head. "I was. But now I'm not so sure." She gently placed her hand on the armor's surface. "The armor has always been a part of our ancestors, meant for warriors who can carry its power. But there's something unique about you. It's as if the armor recognizes something in you." Jake felt a deep unease settle in his stomach. "But why me? I'm just a regular guy. You may think that," Celine said softly. "But the armor doesn't choose based on strength alone. It chooses based on something deeper, something that you might not even be aware of." Jake stared at his reflection in a polished metal panel. The armor now seemed to glow brighter than before, almost pulsing with energy. He didn't feel the usual fear or uncertainty. Instead, there was an odd calmness that filled him, a sense of clarity that he had never experienced. "Do you feel that?" Jake asked, turning to Celine. Celine nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Yes, the armor is reacting differently than it has before. It's like it's alive, as if it's connected to you in a way we don't understand." Jake flexed his hands inside the gauntlets, feeling the subtle power flowing through him. He felt faster, stronger, more aware of everything around him. It was as if the armor was enhancing every one of his senses. Every tiny sound, every small movement, every shift in the air was now vivid and sharp. "How do I control it?" he asked, his voice low with a mixture of fear and awe. Celine frowned. "That's the problem. The armor is meant to be wielded by those who understand its power. It's not just a tool. It's a part of us, a link to our ancestors. You don't know how to control it, and it's dangerous if you try to use it without understanding its purpose." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "So what should I do?" Celine hesitated, her gaze shifting between the armor and Jake's face. "You need to understand it, Jake. If the armor has truly chosen you, then it will need to be unlocked in the proper way. I don't know if you're ready, but we don't have a choice now." Jake stood up, his legs feeling strong beneath him. He could feel the armor adjusting to his every movement, as though it were waiting for him to take the next step. It was a strange sensation, like it was part of his very being, and yet it was foreign and overwhelming. "You must train," Celine said, her voice resolute. "The armor is not just for protection. It's a weapon, but it is also a responsibility. You must learn to control it before it controls you." Jake nodded. The idea of training in this ancient armor was daunting, but the power it gave him was undeniable. The more he wore it, the more he felt like he was meant to be something more than just a regular man. But with that feeling came a great sense of fear. What if the armor's power was too much for him to handle? Celine led Jake to the training grounds, where the air was thick with the smell of earth and metal. The space was filled with wooden targets and training dummies. Some of the Thalorian soldiers practiced their combat techniques nearby, casting curious glances at Jake. "You need to start small," Celine advised. Focus on your movements and let the armor guide you. Don't think about the power it gives. You just move with it." Jake took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He glanced at the training dummies ahead of him. He lifted his arm and threw a punch at the closest one. Not expecting much, but to his surprise, the armor reacted. Before he could fully think about it, his fist collided with the dummy, and it was sent flying back with incredible force. Jake stumbled back in shock. "What? How did that happen?" Celine watched him closely. Her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and caution. "The armor has chosen you, Jake, but now you must learn to control it. You have power, but power without control, it's dangerous." Jake clenched his fists, feeling the rush of energy surge through him again. He could feel the power of the armor, pulsing with every heartbeat. It was thrilling, but it was also frightening. What would happen if he lost control? "Let's try again," Celine said, her voice firm as Jake began his training. He realized that this was only the beginning. The armor had given him strength, but it had also brought with it a heavy burden. He had no idea what the armor's true purpose was or why it had chosen him. But one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. Jake stood in the center of the training grounds, his body still adjusting to the overwhelming power of the armor. His movements felt both strange and natural at the same time. Each time he swung a punch or took a step, the armor responded, guiding him as if it had a mind of its own. The weight of it was no longer burdensome, it was a part of him. Celine watched carefully from the sidelines, her eyes filled with curiosity and caution. She had never seen anything like this before. The sacred armor of her ancestors was not meant for humans, yet it had chosen Jake. The power that was now coursing through him was something she couldn't fully understand. "You're doing well," Celine called out, her voice clear across the open space. "But remember, power without control can be dangerous." Jake nodded, trying to focus. His body was moving with an ease that had never been possible for him before. He wasn't a fighter by any means, but now it felt like the armor was making him one. Every motion, every strike, felt like it was part of a larger design. As though the armor had been made just for him, he took a deep breath and turned toward. A group of training dummies lined up in front of him with a single thought. He focused on the first target. Without thinking, his body reacted, and he lunged forward. His fist collided with the wooden dummy with a loud thud. The force of the blow sent the dummy flying across the ground, breaking it apart in an instant. Jake stepped back, shocked by the raw strength he had just displayed. The power that the armor gave him was more than he had ever imagined. It was as though he had become someone else, someone capable of great feats. His breath was heavy as he looked down at his hands, still not entirely sure of what was happening. "How did I do that?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. Celine walked over to him, her face serious. "You've unlocked the power of the armor, Jake. But you need to understand something. This is not just about strength. The armor was made for warriors who were trained in combat, not for someone who has never fought before. You have the potential to do great things, but you also have the potential to destroy everything around you if you don't learn how to control it." Jake nodded slowly, trying to process her words. "I understand, but how do I control it? I can feel it. It's like the armor is guiding me, but I don't know what to do with all this power." Celine sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's the problem. The armor doesn't just give you strength, it takes something from you, too. It's part of an ancient tradition, passed down through generations of my people. But it's more than just a piece of armor. It's a link to our ancestors, a connection to a power that can change the course of history." Jake looked down at the glowing armor, feeling a strange sense of responsibility building inside him. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted any part of this ancient power, but now he was tied to it. The weight of it pressed on him, and he couldn't help but wonder if he was capable of living up to whatever destiny the armor had in store for him. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Jake admitted, his voice uncertain. "I'm just a regular guy. I don't know anything about this world, this armor, or your people. I don't belong here." "You do now," Celine said firmly, her eyes steady on his. "Whether you like it or not, The armor has chosen you, and now, you must learn how to wield it. Jake turned his gaze back to the training dummies. The power was still within him, pulsing beneath his skin, urging him to act. He couldn't just stand here, unsure of himself. He had to try. Taking another deep breath, he focused his energy on the next dummy. He didn't think about how much strength he had, how much power the armor was giving him. Instead, he let his body move on its own. This time, when he struck, it was even more powerful than before. The dummy shattered into pieces, scattering across the ground. Jake stood there, his heart racing. He had never felt this alive, this powerful. But the excitement that came with it was quickly replaced by unease. What was happening to him? Who was he becoming? Celine noticed the change in him. "Jake," she said softly, her voice filled with concern, "you're letting the armor control you, instead of the other way around. You can't let it define who you are." He looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? I thought that's what I was supposed to do, use the power." Celine took a step closer, her voice becoming more serious. "No, the power is a tool. It's not who you are. You must never forget that. The armor may have chosen you, but it doesn't make you one of us. You're still human, Jake. And being human is what gives you strength, not the armor." Jake stood quietly, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. The armor might have given him power, but it didn't change who he was. It didn't change the person he had been before this all began. He had to remember that. "I get it," Jake said finally, his voice steadier than before. "I have to control it, not let it control me." Celine nodded, her expression softening. "Good, you're learning." But as Jake stood there, trying to find his footing, he couldn't shake the feeling that the armor's power was much deeper than Celine realized. He had only scratched the surface, and he knew that soon he would have to make a choice. Would he accept the power and use it to protect the people he cared about, or would he risk losing himself to it? Jake stood on the edge of the training field, his breathing steady but his mind racing. The weight of the armor felt both familiar and foreign to him now. It had been weeks since he first put it on, and in that time, the power it gave him had only grown stronger. He had trained tirelessly under Celine's watchful eye, but with every passing day, he could feel the armor's influence becoming harder to control. Today, however, felt different. He couldn't shake the unease in his gut, a feeling that something inside him was beginning to shift. The more he relied on the armor, the more it felt like it was becoming a part of him, like it was changing who he was. "Jake." Celine's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone calm but firm. "Focus. Don't let your mind wander. The armor only responds to your will if you remain in control." Jake nodded, though inside, he wasn't so sure. He had been doing everything Celine had told him. He had followed her instructions, learning how to harness the armor's power with precision. But lately, it felt like the armor was controlling him instead. Every strike, every move, felt effortless, too easy. And with each victory, he felt a little less like the man he used to be. The power was intoxicating. It was like an endless well, always there, ready to be tapped. But each time he used it, Jake felt something inside him slipping away. The armor made him stronger, faster, and more capable, but it also made him colder, more distant. He wasn't sure how to stop it. Again, Celine instructed, standing a few paces away, her gaze intense. She was testing him, pushing him to see if he could master the power of the armor without losing himself. Jake clenched his fists, feeling the energy surge through him. He could do this. He could control it. He had to. Without thinking, he lunged forward, his body moving like it was guided by the armor itself. He struck a training dummy, sending it flying across the field with a force he hadn't intended. His heart skipped a beat. It had been too much. His breath quickened as he watched the pieces of the dummy scatter. "Stop," Celine commanded, her voice sharp. "That wasn't control. You're letting the armor dictate your actions, not your mind. This isn't just about raw power." Jake's chest tightened. He knew she was right. It was as if the armor was urging him to destroy everything in its path. He had to fight it. But how? How could he control something that seemed so much stronger than he was? You have to remember who you are, Celine continued, her expression softening. The armor is a tool, not your identity. If you let it define you, it will change you perhaps in ways you'll never get back. Jake turned away from her, feeling frustration rise in his chest. He wanted to be strong. He wanted to protect the people here, especially Celine. He had never asked for this power, but now it was part of him, and he didn't know how to let it go. I don't want to lose myself, Jake said, his voice low and filled with doubt. But every time I fight, every time I use this armor, it's like I'm becoming something else. Celine's eyes softened with understanding. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. Jake, I know it's hard. I can see what's happening to you. But the armor isn't the problem. It's how you use it. The power is there, yes, but you have to decide how to wield it. Jake stared down at the ground, his mind spinning. He felt as though he was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of which direction to go. He had been trained to fight, to protect, but this was different. This was something far beyond anything he had ever faced. I'm afraid, he admitted quietly. What if I lose control? What if I hurt someone? What if I change so much that I'm not me anymore? Celine's grip tightened on his shoulder. That fear, Jake, is what will keep you grounded. You're not meant to be a weapon. The armor is a tool for protection, not destruction. If you hold onto who you are, you can use it wisely. But if you let it consume you, it will destroy you. Jake looked up at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. How do I stop it from consuming me? Celine gave him a small smile, one full of both hope and warning. You take it one step at a time. You remind yourself who you are, what you stand for, every time you wear the armor. It will test you, but you have the choice to fight back. It's not the armor that's the danger, it's the way you let it change you. For the first time, Jake felt a small sense of relief. He wasn't alone in this struggle. Celine understood, and maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to keep his humanity while using the power the armor gave him. I'll try, Jake said, his voice stronger now. I won't let it take me. Celine nodded. Good, and remember, you don't have to face this alone. You have allies here, people who care about you. Lean on them when you need to. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the training field, Jake took a deep breath, the weight of the armor pressing down on him once again. But this time, he felt a little more prepared. He had a long road ahead of him, but he wasn't giving up. He had to master the armor, to use its power for good, not destruction. And most importantly, he had to remember who he was and not let the armor define him. The days had passed in a blur of training and sleepless nights for Jake. The armor had become a part of him, and he was slowly learning how to control its power. But despite his progress, the fear of losing himself lingered in the back of his mind. Every time he put the armor on, he couldn't help but wonder if he was getting closer to the edge, to the point where he would no longer recognize himself. Celine had been patient, guiding him through each challenge. She had always believed in him, but the weight of the armor was starting to feel heavier with every passing day. He could feel the pressure building. Something was coming, something that would test him in ways he wasn't prepared for. That something came sooner than expected. The sun had barely risen when the first warning came. The alarm bells echoed throughout the kingdom, a sound that sent a chill down Jake's spine. It wasn't the usual warning of a storm or a minor threat, it was the sound of war. Jake and Celine rushed to the command center, where the royal advisors and military leaders were already gathered. Tension filled the room, and the air was thick with urgency. A holographic map of the kingdom and its surrounding areas flickered to life, showing a large fleet moving toward the planet. Who are they? Jake asked, his voice steady despite the rising fear in his chest. One of the commanders, a tall Felorian with sharp features, looked grim as he pointed to the approaching fleet on the map. It's the Varkians, a ruthless empire to the north. They've been eyeing our land for years, and now they've decided to take it by force. Celine's expression darkened. They must have heard of the armor. They know of its power, and they want it for themselves. Jake's mind raced. He had heard of the Varkians, an empire known for its brutal conquests and thirst for power. They were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. But we're not ready. Jake said, his heart pounding. We can't fight them with just our forces. They're too powerful. Celine turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. We may not be ready, but you are. The armor is the key. You are the only one who can stop them. Jake's stomach twisted at the thought. He hadn't even faced an army before. How could he take on the Varkians? But he knew there was no turning back. The people here were counting on him, and he couldn't let them down. Then I'll fight, he said, his voice unwavering. But we need a plan. We can't just charge into battle blindly. Celine nodded, already thinking ahead. We have the element of surprise. The Varkians don't know the full extent of your power. If we can strike quickly and decisively, we might be able to push them back before they can organize. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know if he was ready for this kind of responsibility. But he had no choice. The people of the kingdom were relying on him, and he couldn't fail them. The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Celine and the commanders worked together to organize the kingdom's defenses, while Jake trained with the soldiers, preparing himself for the fight ahead. His body felt ready, but his mind was still clouded with doubt. What if the armor was too much for him? What if he lost control? Jake, Celine said quietly as they stood at the edge of the camp, watching the fleet draw closer. I know you're scared, but you've come so far. You can do this. Jake looked at her, his heart heavy. I don't know if I can. This isn't just about strength. I've never been a hero. Celine placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes kind. But you are now. The armor chose you for a reason. It saw something in you, and you've proven that you can control it. Don't doubt yourself now. Her words gave him the strength to stand taller. He wasn't just wearing the armor for himself anymore. He was wearing it for the people of this kingdom, for Celine, and for everything they stood to lose. As the Varkian fleet neared the planet's atmosphere, Jake felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. It wasn't the calm of indifference, it was the calm of knowing that he had no other choice but to fight. The armor, which had once felt like a burden, now felt like a tool he could use to protect those he cared about. The first wave of Varkian ships entered the atmosphere, their massive warships casting long shadows over the land. Jake stood at the front of the kingdom's defenses, the armor gleaming in the morning light. He could feel the power within him, but this time, he didn't let it overwhelm him. He focused, controlling it, keeping it in check. Celine stood beside him, ready to lead her people into battle. Are you ready? She asked. Jake nodded, his eyes steely with determination. Let's do this. With a single command from Celine, the battle began. The air was filled with the roar of engines as the kingdom's soldiers launched their attacks, engaging the Varkian fleet in a fierce aerial battle. Jake moved with the precision of a trained warrior, striking down enemies with the speed and power of the armor. Each strike felt easier than the last, as though the armor was guiding him, urging him forward. But even with his newfound strength, Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. The Varkians were ruthless, and they weren't going to back down. He could feel their power, their hunger for control, and it fueled his determination to stop them. The battle raged on, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But Jake refused to give up. With every fight, he grew stronger, more confident. He was no longer just a man in armor, he was a force to be reckoned with, and he was determined to protect everything he had come to care about. The battle had been raging for hours, the sounds of explosions echoing across the kingdom. Jake stood in the heart of the fight, his heart pounding in his chest as the armor hummed with power. The Varkian forces had proven to be a fierce adversary, but Jake wasn't backing down. The armor was an incredible tool, and every time he swung a punch or struck with a blade, the power flowed through him, almost as if the armor was guiding him. But with every blow, every victory, Jake felt himself slipping further away from who he once was. The armor's power, though necessary, was beginning to feel like a weight that was becoming too much to bear. It was making him strong, but at the same time, it was changing him. He could feel the coldness growing inside him, as if the armor was taking over, urging him to destroy without mercy. The Varkians weren't giving up. Their forces were relentless, and the kingdom's soldiers were beginning to tire. Jake's eyes scanned the battlefield, and he noticed that even the might of the armor wasn't enough to secure a victory. The Varkians had deployed their strongest warriors, beasts, and machines designed to destroy everything in their path. Jake had to act quickly. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind, but the power of the armor was overwhelming. Every movement felt like it had a life of its own. He couldn't control it completely. The more he fought, the more it seemed like the armor was pulling him deeper into a dark place. The thoughts that ran through his mind weren't his own. The armor's ancient warriors, those who had once worn it, seemed to speak to him from the depths of the power, urging him to fight harder, to strike faster, to never show mercy. Jake, Celine's voice broke through his thoughts. She appeared at his side, her face filled with concern. You're losing yourself. You can't let it control you. Jake's vision blurred for a moment. He wanted to listen to her, but the power coursing through him was too tempting. It was so easy to just give in, to let the armor's strength take over completely. But deep inside, Jake knew she was right. If he lost control now, he wouldn't be able to stop himself. He would become the very thing he feared, a weapon, nothing more. I can't stop, Jake said through gritted teeth. I'm too foreign. The power is too much. Celine grabbed his arm, her grip firm despite the chaos around them. You have to fight it, Jake. You can't let it consume you. Remember who you are, remember why you're fighting. Her words pierced through the haze of power surrounding him. Slowly, Jake took a step back, his mind struggling to regain control. It wasn't easy. The armor wanted to keep going, wanted to continue destroying everything in its path. But Jake, focused, reaching deep inside himself, trying to find the man he used to be, the man who wasn't just a weapon. With a strained breath, Jake forced himself to take the helmet off, letting the weight of the armor rest for a moment. The world seemed to slow down around him as the power receded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he could think clearly. His body was still strong, still quick, but the cold, distant feeling began to fade. I won't let it control me, Jake whispered to himself. As much as to Celine, he could still feel the power of the armor, but now he knew he had the strength to choose how to use it. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a man with a purpose. Celine nodded, a relieved smile crossing her face. You're stronger than the armor, Jake. Don't forget that. With newfound determination, Jake stepped back into the battle. The Varkians were still pressing forward, but Jake knew he could face them now, with control over himself and the power he wielded. He didn't need to destroy everything in his path. He didn't need to become the very thing he feared. He just needed to protect those who mattered. The Varkian warriors charged, but this time, Jake moved differently. He wasn't just relying on brute force. He was thinking, calculating each move. With every strike, he didn't feel the armor taking over. Instead, he felt himself guiding the armor, using it for the protection of his people, not for destruction. The tide of the battle began to shift. Jake, Celine, and the kingdom's soldiers fought side by side, their unity giving them strength. The Varkians, though fierce, began to falter. Their massive machines were brought down by the combined efforts of the kingdom's soldiers, and their warriors were pushed back. The power that Jake once feared had become his greatest weapon, but he had learned to wield it with precision and care. Hours later, as the sun began to set, the battlefield fell silent. The Varkian forces had been defeated. The kingdom had won, but at a great cost. Many lives had been lost, and the kingdom was left to pick up the pieces. Jake stood in the midst of the field, his breath heavy but his heart light. He had won the battle, but more importantly, he had won back control over himself. Celine approached him, her expression one of pride and relief. You did it, Jake, she said softly. You didn't just save us, you saved yourself. Jake nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I couldn't have done it without you. Celine smiled back, her eyes softening. You're more than just a warrior, Jake. You're a hero. Jake looked at her, the weight of the armor on his shoulders feeling lighter than ever before. He had faced the darkness inside him and had come out stronger. He wasn't just a man in the armor anymore, he was Jake, and that was enough. The battle was over, The Varkian forces had been defeated, and the kingdom was safe at least for now. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his journey wasn't over. In the heat of the battle, he had found something more than just victory. He had found a new understanding of himself, but that understanding came with a heavy burden. The armor, the power it gave him, and the fear that it could consume him again, it all weighed on him. As the kingdom began to rebuild, Jake found himself standing alone on a hill overlooking the ruins of the battlefield. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the land. His body was sore, his mind tired, but the questions that had been haunting him still lingered. "Celine," Jake said, turning as he heard footsteps approach. She had been working with the soldiers to assess the damage, but now she stood beside him, her presence as steady and strong as always. "You've been quiet since the battle," she said softly, her voice full of understanding. "Is everything all right?" Jake shook his head, his thoughts swirling. "I thought I had it figured out. I thought the battle was the hardest part, but now I don't know what to do. The armor, what it did to me, I can't forget that. It's like I was someone else." Celine placed a hand on his shoulder, offering comfort. "I know it's not easy. The power of the armor isn't just about strength that changes you, but you've learned to control it, Jake. You've proven that." Jake's eyes looked out over the kingdom, the people beginning to rebuild their homes, their lives. "But how do I know I can control it forever? What if the armor starts to take over again? What if I lose myself in it?" Celine sighed and stood next to him, her gaze also fixed on the horizon. "That's something you'll have to decide for yourself. The armor may give you power, but it's your choices that matter the most. You already made the most important choice, to not let it control you." Jake thought about her words. She was right. He had chosen to fight, to protect those he cared about, and to not let the armor change who he was. But as he stood there, he couldn't help but wonder if he was ready to make the choice again, if the armor would call to him once more, urging him to use it without thinking, without caring. "It's not just about the power," Jake said, his voice quiet but steady. "It's about who I want to be. I can't let the armor define me. I have to choose who I am every single day." Celine smiled gently. "That's the hardest part, Jake, but it's also what makes you human." Jake looked at her, a sense of peace settling in his chest. The fear that had gripped him for so long, the fear of losing himself, began to fade. He had faced the darkness within him, and he had chosen the light. The armor might have given him strength, but it was his heart, his choices, that made him who he was. "Thank you, Celine," Jake said, his voice full of gratitude. "You've been with me every step of the way. I don't know what I would have done without you." Celine's eyes softened, and she gave him a warm, knowing smile. "You would have done just fine. Jake, you're stronger than you realize." They stood together in silence for a while, watching as the last of the Varkian ships were taken from the sky and the people of the kingdom began to heal. Jake knew there would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, more decisions to make. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready. He knew who he was, and he was no longer afraid of the power he wielded. "Maybe," Jake said after a while, his voice thoughtful, "the hardest part wasn't the battle. Maybe it was realizing that I didn't have to be perfect. I just have to keep trying, every day." Celine nodded. "That's the essence of being human. We're not perfect, but we always have a choice, and you've made the right one." Jake turned to her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I think I'm starting to understand that." Celine smiled back. "Good, because the journey isn't over. You'll face more challenges, but now you know that you have the strength to overcome them." Jake stood tall, the weight of the armor still on his shoulders, but this time, it didn't feel as heavy. He had learned to balance the power within him and the responsibility that came with it. And most importantly, he had learned that strength wasn't just about physical power, it was about making the right choices, even when it was hard. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jake knew that his path was just beginning. The kingdom would rebuild, and he would be there to help protect it. But his real battle was the one within himself, the battle to remain true to who he was. No matter what the future held, he looked at Celine, who stood beside him, her presence a reminder of the strength they had both found in each other. Together, they would face whatever came next, knowing that the greatest power was the choice to be who they truly were.